welcome back to the studio. It's been an amazing week for me here in the studio, and I tie a lot of it partially to the weather. Some of the days we were here in the 60s and 70s, and I felt like my body was coming back to life. I just don't like the heat of the summer and the humidity, and I wasn't responding well. So now that it's cooler, I think I've got 4 or 5 things finished this week, which has been really amazing for me. I'm trying to get caught back up and a little bit ahead. So I'm going to keep on that path. We had finished the Daisy Dotz. I believe this was the gray lavender. It's a small or medium, I forget which. There's several colorways of this and a couple different sizes, but we finished this either in late spring or early summer. So I'm glad to go ahead and get this quilted while we're still in the season. I just recently got this pattern, quilting pattern. It was Prism Peaked. It was one of the weekly design sales that we have every week at Urban Elements. They always feature a particular item, and they have that like 20% off. And so if you've signed up for the email list, then you're getting those notifications, and I think it's a great time to add things to your quilting collection. And I'm constantly doing that. So rather than making a bunch of purchases during the sales, which are all coming up later this year, I like to get them one at a time, because sometimes a quilting pattern might be only $10 or somewhere around there for a new design. One of the reasons I'm kind of excited about this particular design is generally there's a gap in between the quilting rows of the digital quilting or on a panto. The interesting thing about this particular design is there is no gap. The design is meant to overlap quite a bit, so there's no space in between the rows at all. And I personally have not done one of these yet, so I'm anxious to see that. Also, I'm going to be using a variegated thread that's kind of like pink and purple, and so it's going to be a little bit stronger than what I normally would do on something like this, but I think it's going to be okay. I'm telling myself it's going to be okay. It's been a good week, so I'm trusting that things are going to continue to pan out. So all I have left to do really is to get this onto the frame. I've already got my backing and batting on the quilt frame, and I have to load the design. So I'm going to go ahead and do those, and we'll switch the camera around and we can get this thing stitching out. I don't think it's going to take super long. I forget how wide this is. Maybe 41 inches. I'll measure it and let you know. I'll let you know when we're putting it in the IQ. I have added or installed my IQ stick into my computer so I can show you how the Prism Peaked is overlapped on the design. So I'm going to start at the main menu. We're going to design Sew Quilt. This is going to be a new project, so we're going to start new. This is our old stitching time. We're going to reset that, and we're going to do a pantograph. The quilt that I did or am doing is fairly small. It's only 41 by 41, so I'm going to enter that information manually. So we have the width is 41, enter. The height is also 41, and enter, and we're going to continue. And you'll see here at the top we have the visual representation of my quilt top. So I'm going to hit finished, and my design Prism Peaked is still in my downloads. I haven't cleaned up my library in a while, so I'm going to go to the letter P, and you'll see here Prism Peaked is in my design collection. Before I transfer this to a USB stick, I remove the inventory control number that Urban Elementz utilizes to pay royalties to the designers, and I just have Prism Peaked. I also add the height of the design from the website information, which is also on the PDF you get when you download a design. This is helpful when you are working with a design you're not familiar with, and you can get it as close to what the designer imagined as possible. Less likely to have mistakes this way. So I'm going to click it once and continue, click it again and continue, and that's our even and odd rows. You can see there's quite a big gap in between each of the rows, and I want to eliminate that. So I'm going to click on gap, but what I'm going to use as a reference point is this triangle top right here. I'm going to take that to the bottom, the flat part of this triangle, and that's how I'm going to do my measurements. Now normally I would just run my finger on the screen, but that won't work with this type design, or on the IQ stick rather. So I'm just going to keep hitting the arrow down button until we get this to touch that. And you see we're almost there. Okay, so this diamond now is touching the flat part of this one, but you'll see this part of the diamond completely overlaps the next row, totally eliminating any gap in between. And so this is just a slightly different variation of what we normally do, which is we have some bit of gap, but we just tighten it so we don't see typewriter rows. This completely eliminates that, but it makes for very even quilting. But now if you look here at pattern height, you'll see my pattern height as the design is at 20.339. That's way too big. The original design was only 8.5. So I'm going to select this one button, which will change both of these simultaneously to address the row height. But you'll see row height is the only one highlighted, but it's the pattern height that we're actually looking for. So I'm just going to keep decreasing this. I'm going to try the calculator and try and guess 5.0. That's 5 inches. That brought me down to 8.474. The actual design was 8.5, so I don't think we're going to get any closer. That was a good guess, but we could always just use the arrow up and arrow down. So you can now see by counting your triangles in a row, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 full rows and 2 little partial rows. So now this is ready to go to be stitched out. I have all the adjustments made, and I can hit finished. It has my jump stitches on the edges, but I'm going to change my transition type. Well, I would make it too continuous. I don't know if I... Okay. So this is what I want, continuous. I'm going to accept, and I changed that just by addressing the plus or minus. So I'll accept that, committing to that. Now I'm going to hit sew quilt, but because we are in demo mode, we're on the IQ stick, it's not actually going to sew anything. But I could go ahead and select the first row to quilt, and I'm going to swap my start. No, not here. Continue. I'm going to use Panto sequencing. I'm going to alternate left to right. Alternate. So we'll go left to right on one row, right to left on the next. I'm going to tie off in between. We're going to do the whole quilt. And you can just see it sequence the entire quilt. If I select Sew Quilt, you can see the very first row. It's going to show you what the stitching will look like as we get to the first row, which is just a partial. And also you can see this is going to be the same on the IQ actually stitching it out. This entire quilt, as far as stitch time, will only be approximately 29 minutes. So we should be a good way across the top. And now we're at the end of the first row. If we do start again, now we're quilting onto the second row, which is actually really the first full row. And you can see how close we get there on that diamond, but this will continue to sew, overlapping each row so that there's no gap in between, and ultimately creating a very even quilting pattern. And I'm not going to make you watch the whole thing. We'll see some of this on the machine itself. So I'm going to go ahead and hit pause, and we will add this portion of the video clip into the full video so that you can watch the rest of the quilt being done. I'm going to use Prism Peaked on here. I have isocord thread. It's a variegated from pink to purple, which kind of reminds me of the flower stripe, this Free Spirit fabric. One of the good things about putting the thread on there and then basting the quilt, it does give you an opportunity to see how strong that is going to look on the quilt before you get to the quilting. Of course, I have a little bit of trepidation over that. I usually like a more neutral thread that matches the background, but I'm going a little bit stronger. One, because I kind of like it, but the other, I think it'll read easier to see on the camera. I'm going to go over on the screen how I'm going to input the information, but I also think I'm going to go in the house and use the IQ stick and allow you to see in very clear fashion how this design is brought into the IQ system and how we overlap it to eliminate the gap to our comfort or taste for that particular thing. Another reason that I'm using this is a couple of reasons. This is a Melonie Caldwell design. There's two that are very similar. One has a rounded top, the other one has a very sharp point. But I just wanted to use one of Mel's quilting patterns here, but also I wanted the juxtaposition of design. You have a floral pattern, very curvy, a lot of rounded points, rounded on the bird, curve of the vine. So I'm going opposite. I'm going to give very geometric shape, and I will tell you that this is probably much easier to do on a digitized system than it would be for paper. Those of you who are really good with the designs, you probably could handle this with no problem. With the Panto, I usually reserve very geometric patterns for digital users. But I'm looking forward to seeing how this stitches out with the sharp points of the quilting, balancing out the curves of the applique design. So we're going to design sew quilt, starting new. I have a work in progress. Do I want to replace it? It always says that. I always want to replace it. Do I want to permanently erase what I was working on? Yes, because I don't need it taking up the memory of the IQ. I had stitching time from my last project, which was 18 minutes. I don't even know what that was. I'm going to reset that. The design I'm going to be using is a Pantograph. I'm going to enter the rectangle manually because the machine head can't move the full size of the top. And I know that it's 41 inches wide, 41 inches long. And we have a visual representation of my square. I'm going to hit finished. And this is in my download still. I haven't brought it into the main library. I know it's called Prism Peaked. So I selected that, and here it is. This one also would have been really good on this, called Retro Lines, because the design in the background of this is exactly that. It's retro lines minus the little circles. That almost gave me pause to change, but I'm sticking to my guns. So I'm going with Prism Peaked, and you won't be able to see from there, but it says 8.5. That tells me how high the designer intended this quilting design to be, which, since I didn't design it, that's useful information. I always put that information in as I'm transferring the file from the download to my saved file. I rename it by eliminating the inventory control number and adding the height. And then I save it to my USB stick and bring it out to the IQ tablet. So I'm going to select that for both the even and odd rows. And you should be able to see slightly that there's a huge gap in between each of the rows. And that's what we're eliminating today. So I'm going to select gap, and I'm going to bring this down. And I don't want the peak of this row to interfere with the middle, but I do want it to overlap the bottom. And I want it to overlap enough that it looks intentional. And I think what I'm going to do is, there's a second peak here. I'm going to join that peak to the bottom part of the above rows flat. So that's going to be my litmus test. So I have that the way I want it as far as the gap, but now my pattern height is 20 inches. So I know that I have to get that back down to the 8.5 that it was intended. And plus, this is way too big of quilting. So I'm going to select that. I'm not going to be able to input 8.5 in the calculator because it would only adjust the row height, not the pattern height. So I'm just going to use my finger to get close to there, and then I'm going to go the rest of the way with the plus or minus. So right now I'm at 8.48, which is as close to 8.5 as I think I can get. And I'm going to go ahead and accept that. And my transition types are going to be continuous. I'm going to commit to those. I'm going to hit Sew Quilt. This time I'm going to use Panto's sequencing assistance. I'm going to sequence the whole quilt. And I'm going to see, I did it. I'm getting the very, very, very top partial row, and I'm going to start on the left, finish on the right. I'm going to hit continue, hit Panto sequencing. Do I want to do, how do I want to, the rows quilted? I want to alternate them so that we're alternating at each end. It will quilt left to right, then right to left, left to right. That's just the way I like to do it. I'm going to tie off between rows. I want to do the whole quilt. And now I can hit Sew Quilt. It's pulled up my first thread. I am on manual. I have decreased my machine speed a little bit, and I might even lower my top tension just a little bit. And I'm happy. I've got it at 3.5. I lowered my stitch to 890, and I'm going to go ahead and hit start. I had some thread breaks in the first row, so I've gone through the alphabet soup of solutions. I checked both the tension on the bobbin, I checked the tension on the top, I changed the thread, changed the needle, and changed the bobbin, and I think it's working better now. But as much as we know about the machines, sometimes we can't figure out why a thread is breaking at any specific moment. But we are at the end. It's sewn a partial row left to right, a full row right to left. We still have room to do at least one more row, maybe two. So I'm back to the start point. It's going to move to the start of row 3, and I can go ahead and hit start. With a design that overlaps like this, I don't think you can get any more along the lines of even quilting or even density. I've gotten 4 rows finished in one, the original roll up of the frame. I'm going to roll up the quilt for the first time. What I've done is take the needle and the crosshair, which are the same, and I put the crosshair at the highest point of the next row that needs to be stitched. So I know that when the machine is moving towards the back, that it will be able to accommodate that highest point. That's what I'm going to use as my gauge for rolling up. So I've reached that point. Now I can go and realign the quilt. My crosshair is way at the top now, but I need to bring it back to a point that I've already stitched, and I'm going to choose this point here. And I'm going to let the machine know. I guess I could have just let it go over there. And I can even check and I did not realign it properly, so I'm going to hit realign again, and I'm going to try and do a better job. The first full peak down. Now I'm going to move the machine there. Now before I start stitching, I'm just going to verify that again. It's just a tiny bit off, but I'm going to go with that. But before I get started, I'm going to go ahead and baste my 2 edges, and I'm going to try changing the needle again because I'm still getting a few thread breaks. So I've already realigned for the next 2/3 of the quilt. I probably will only have to roll up one more time after this, but I'm going to go ahead and baste the edges, and then I'll show you my start back. I've done the first 4 rows. I'm at the start of row 5. I've done my first roll up, I've realigned, and now I'm back. I've also basted the 2 edges of the quilt. So now I should be ready to start row 5. I'm simply going to pull up the needle, raise the hopping foot, and press start because I believe we have enough room for the next row. I am at the start of row 8. You can see I'm towards the end of the quilt. I've readjusted to eliminate any wasted stitching below the quilt line. And all I have to do, I pulled my needle up and raised my hopping foot, so I'm going to press start. It's going to go to the start of row 8. And because I've sequenced the whole quilt, it already knows one step after the other. I don't have to tell it at each row. I shouldn't have to move the quilt anymore because it's able to get to all of the rows. And hopefully, if I don't have any more thread breaks, I can be finished in less than 6 minutes. The entire sewing time on this project was less than 26 minutes, barring rolling up the quilt and changing the needle and anything else I did. I think my most common constant nemesis with quilting on the long arm is thread breaking. I don't know what's the longest I've ever gone without a thread break, but I know that I could go the rest of my life without another one. We are on the very last row. The remaining time is 3.4 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and film this last section and see how far we can get. Well, that was a total of 26 minutes, according to the IQ, of sewing time. That was the actual stitch out time. Of course, it took me longer than that because I was having some issues with thread breaking. I think as I reflect on it, thread breaking is the most common problem that I have and have had regardless of what machine I have. I have had a handy quilter and I have the Bernina, and sometimes I think I've tried everything, and I think sometimes I wonder if I'm just not a good quilter. But I'm sure I'm not the only person that is stymied by why we have so many thread breaks when we do. So if any of you have any suggestions for thread breaking, I'd be very happy to hear those. Not to get them, but to eliminate them. But I do have a lovely finished top in the end. I have quite a few thread breaks, but I was able to backtrack and restart. And in the end, I have a beautiful piece. I'm happy with the way that the design looks on the quilt top, and I'm also, I'm probably 75% okay with the color of my thread choice and 25% questioning it. But I think once I get a sleeve on here and have it hanging on the wall, I think I will be back to 99% happy. But I'm very happy that this is another finished project. I'm glad to get it off of the stack of things that needed to be done. I'm glad I'm getting it done in the season in which it was intended. And we have another sample to hang. So I'm happy for a lot of things, but I'm also happy that you stuck it out with me and stayed with me through the completion of another project. So thanks for your time today. One of the things that I never like doing is asking for people to subscribe or to like a video. I think people should like the video if they like it, and share the video if they enjoyed it. But I do want to stress that it is very important to any business to have those things happen, because it helps reach a further audience. We at Urban Elements don't have a Patreon page. We want all of our education to be free, and we hope that you appreciate that and that it's worthwhile to you. So we do appreciate it when you do take the time to subscribe, to like, or to share the videos. Me personally, I enjoy hearing some of the feedback that you have, either from the questions that I've asked during the video or other things that might occur to you while you're watching it. So the comments, I'm sure, are beneficial to Urban Elements as well. I personally enjoy that part of it, and I try to answer every comment. But the likes and the shares and the subscriptions really do help Urban Elements reach a broader audience. And again, we do try and maintain a free education system and a very high level of customer support for all of the products that they sell. So thanks for stopping by with yet another project. I hope that you enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you here again next time.